The brightest light in the darkest days. A mother's love, a son's fight. The first time Emily held her son in her arms, she knew her life had changed forever. The soft coos of the newborn boy, the way his tiny fingers wrapped around hers. It was the kind of love that could move mountains. She named him Noah, meaning peace and comfort, hoping his life would be filled with both. For 6 years, Noah was just like any other child, full of laughter, boundless energy, and an insatiable curiosity about the world. He was the kind of boy who made everyone around him smile, the kind of child who never met a stranger. Whether it was playing with his toy dinosaurs, running around the backyard chasing butterflies, or making up bedtime stories that left Emily in stitches, Noah was a ray of light in an often dim world. But life had different plans. The first signs of trouble. It started with a fever. At first, Emily thought it was just another routine childhood illness, something that would pass in a day or two with some rest, fluids, and cuddles. But Noah's fever didn't go away. Then came the fatigue, the unexplained bruises, and the moments when his boundless energy seemed to vanish into thin air. A mother's intuition is a powerful thing, and Emily's heart clenched with fear. The doctors ran tests, trying to reassure her that it was probably just a virus. But deep down she knew. When the results came back, her world crumbled. Noah was diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of leukemia, hope, and heartbreak. Emily refused to let fear consume her. She became Noah's fiercest advocate, researching treatments, asking every question she could think of, and standing by his side through every painful procedure. The hospital became their second home, filled with beeping machines, the scent of antiseptic, and the soft murmurs of nurses who grew to love the little boy with the biggest heart. Through it all, Noah never lost his spirit. "Mom, it's just a bump in the road," he'd say with a grin that made Emily's eyes well with tears. "That's right, baby," she would whisper, holding him close. "Just a bump." But deep down, she knew the road was getting rougher. A wish in the night. One night, as Emily sat by Noah's hospital bed, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, he stirred and opened his tired but bright blue eyes. "Mom, do you think heaven has dinosaurs?" he asked sleepily. Emily smiled, brushing his soft hair back. "I think heaven has anything you wanted to have, sweetheart." Noah grinned. "Then it's going to be awesome." Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had to be strong. For him. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of hope and heartbreak. One moment, they thought a new treatment was working. The next, they were told the cancer had spread. Through it all, Noah remained his joyful, courageous self. The moment that changed everything. One evening, after a particularly difficult round of treatment, Noah looked up at his mother with those same shining blue eyes and whispered, "Mom, I don't want you to be sad." Emily bit her lip, fighting back the sob that threatened to escape. "I could never be sad with you here, my love." Noah nodded, as if he already knew. And then he whispered something. 4 words that shattered Emily's heart into a million pieces. 4 words that would stay a love that never fades. The strength of a mother's heart. Emily had always believed that a mother's love was the strongest force in the universe. It could heal wounds, chase away nightmares, and bring warmth even on the coldest days. But as she sat beside Noah's hospital bed, clutching his tiny hand, she realized that love couldn't change fate. It couldn't erase the cruel reality that her little boy was slipping away. Noah's words, "Mommy, I'm not scared," echoed in her mind, cutting deeper than any pain she had ever known. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that his innocence and courage shielded him from the unbearable fear that gripped her own heart. But he was just 6 years old. How could a child, so small and full of life, face the end with such acceptance? Emily brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, her fingers trembling. "You're the bravest boy I know, my love," she whispered, forcing a smile through the tears she refused to let fall. Noah gave her a sleepy smile, his eyelids heavy with exhaustion. "Because I have the best money," he murmured. Her heart clenched. This wasn't fair. None of this was fair. The days grow shorter. The doctors had stopped talking about next steps. The treatments, once filled with hopeful what-ifs, had now turned into whispered conversations behind closed doors. There was nothing more they could do. Emily knew that meant one thing. She had to make every moment count. So she did. She filled Noah's room with his favorite things. His stuffed T-Rex sat beside him, always within reach. His beloved bedtime stories were read over and over, even when his eyes grew too tired to stay open. His favorite songs played softly, filling the sterile hospital air with warmth. When he had the strength, they painted pictures together, his tiny hands gripping the brush as he created colorful dinosaurs and shooting stars. He giggled when Emily made silly voices, pretending to be a T-Rex on a great adventure. But as the days passed, Noah's giggles became softer. His hands, once so eager to hold hers, grew weaker. Emily tried to be strong, but in the quiet moments, when Noah was asleep, she allowed herself to break. She cried into her hands, muffling her sobs so he wouldn't hear. She whispered prayers, bargaining with any higher power that might be listening. But deep down she knew. She was running out of time. A conversation no mother should have. One afternoon, as the golden sunlight streamed through the hospital window, Noah turned to Emily with a serious expression. "Mommy, do you think I can be an angel?" he asked softly. Emily froze. Her heart pounded as she struggled to find her voice. "Baby, you're already an angel," she whispered, forcing herself to stay strong. Noah smiled. "Do angels get to watch over the people they love?" Emily's throat tightened. "I think they do." He nodded, as if satisfied. "Then I won't be far away." The words shattered her. She wanted to scream that it wasn't time to talk about this. She wanted to tell him he would grow up, go on adventures, and have a lifetime of dreams to chase. But she couldn't lie to him. She swallowed hard, cupping his small face in her hands. "No matter where you are, I will always love you," she said, "and I will always feel you with me." Noah grinned, "And I'll send you signs so you don't forget." Emily blinked away her tears. What kind of signs? He scrunched his nose, thinking, maybe rainbows, or butterflies, or dinosaurs. She let out a watery laugh, kissing his forehead. "Then I'll look for dinosaurs everywhere." Noah beamed, satisfied with their promise. The final gift. A few nights later, Noah asked for something unexpected. "Mommy, can we go home?" Emily's heart ached. The doctors had said he could stay in the hospital for as long as he needed, but she knew that wasn't what Noah wanted. He wanted to be home. So she made it happen. The doctors arranged for hospice care, and Emily carried Noah into their house, cradling him like she had when he was a baby. His room was already set up, his favorite blankets, his stuffed animals, the stars on his ceiling glowing just like they always had. As she tucked him into bed, he sighed contentedly. "This feels nice." Emily curled up beside him, holding him close. "I love you, Noah," she whispered. He smiled sleepily. "I love you too, Mommy." The whisper that changed everything. The next morning, the house was quiet. Emily woke up to find Noah still curled up in her arms, his breathing soft and steady. But she knew. She felt it in the air, in the stillness, in the way the morning sunlight cast a golden glow across his peaceful face. Tears filled her eyes as she brushed his hair back. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Noah spoke his last words. 4 words that broke her heart into 1,000 pieces. "Mommy, I see them." Emily's breath caught. "See who, baby?" she asked, her voice trembling. Noah's lips curled into a soft smile, his eyelids fluttering. "The angels," he whispered. "They're here." And then, with one final breath, Noah closed his eyes. Emily clutched him to her chest, her body racked with silent sobs. The room was filled with sunlight. A single butterfly landed on the windowsill. And Emily knew. Noah had become an angel. Love beyond goodbye. The mother's unbearable grief. Emily sat frozen, holding Noah's still body in her arms. Time had stopped. Her world had shattered. She felt as if she had been pulled into a reality where the air was too thick to breathe, where her heart had forgotten how to beat. Her baby was gone. She gently rocked him, whispering his name like a prayer, as if she could call him back from wherever he had gone. "Noah, my love, please, please wake up," she murmured, but there was only silence. Tears ran freely down her face, soaking into the soft fabric of his pajama top. His tiny fingers, which had once clutched hers so tightly, were now still. His breathing, which had been a lullaby to her every night, had faded into nothingness. Emily didn't scream. She didn't wail. She simply held him, pressing her forehead against his. And for the first time in her life, she felt truly alone. The hours that followed. The sun continued its slow rise, casting golden light into Noah's room. The house was quiet, unbearably so. Emily wasn't sure how long she stayed like that, but eventually she heard a gentle knock at the door. Her sister, Claire, stepped inside cautiously. She had been staying with them, helping as much as she could. One look at Emily's face, and she knew. Claire's breath hitched. "Oh, Em." Emily turned to her, her expression blank, her voice barely a whisper. "He's gone." Claire swallowed the sob that rose in her throat. Slowly, she walked over and placed a trembling hand on Emily's shoulder. "I'm so sorry," she choked out. The nurses arrived soon after. They moved quietly, their faces filled with sorrow. One of them, an older woman with kind eyes, knelt beside Emily and spoke gently. "Would you like a few more moments with him?" Emily nodded, unable to form words. She pressed one last kiss to Noah's forehead, breathing in his scent, committing every detail to memory. The weight of him in her arms, the softness of his cheek against hers. Then, with a heart that felt like it had been ripped in half, she let him go. As they carried Noah's body away, Emily's world crumbled. The hollow days, the days after Noah's passing, felt like an endless blur. People came and went. Friends, family, neighbors, all offering condolences, bringing food she couldn't eat, speaking words she couldn't hear. She barely left Noah's room. She couldn't. His scent still lingered in the air. His toys were still scattered across the floor, his drawings still taped to the walls. It felt like if she left, even for a second, she would lose what little she had left of him. The nights were the worst. She would wake up, instinctively reaching for him, only to be met with cold sheets. The emptiness was suffocating. One night, as she sat curled up in Noah's bed, she found his little notebook, the one he had scribbled in when he was too tired to play. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the uneven crayon strokes. And then she saw it, a page filled with messy, colorful letters. "Mommy, I love you. I will always be with you. Look for me in the rainbows." Tears poured down Emily's face as she clutched the notebook to her chest. Signs from Noah. A week after Noah's funeral, Emily found herself sitting on their back porch, staring at the sky. She hadn't spoken much since that day, hadn't felt like she belonged to the world anymore. She closed her eyes. "Noah, where are you?" And then, as if the universe had answered, she felt a warm breeze brush against her skin. When she opened her eyes, a vibrant rainbow stretched across the sky. Her breath caught. She let out a shaky laugh, fresh tears filling her eyes. "A rainbow, huh?" she whispered. "Is that you, baby?" The wind picked up slightly, wrapping around her like an embrace. It was a sign. Noah had kept his promise. Trying to live again. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, painfully, Emily began to move through life again. She started going on walks. At first, they were short, just to the mailbox, just to the end of the block. But then she found herself walking further, breathing in the fresh air, letting the world remind her that it was still there. One day, as she was walking through the park, she heard a little boy laughing. She turned, and for a split second, she could have sworn she saw Noah's messy brown curls, his bright blue eyes. Her heart ached. But when the boy turned, she realized it wasn't him. Of course, it wasn't. Noah was gone. But somehow, she felt him in that moment, in the laughter, in the joy, in the way the sun filtered through the trees. He was still with her, keeping Noah's memory alive. Emily knew she couldn't let Noah's life fade away. She needed to do something. She started a blog, pouring her heart into words, sharing Noah's story with the world. She wrote about his strength, his kindness, his unbreakable spirit. She wrote about how he had taught her to see beauty even in the hardest moments. People from all over the world read her words. They sent messages, sharing their own losses, their own grief. Strangers became friends, bonded by pain, but also by love. And then one day, she received an email that changed everything. A mother whose child was battling leukemia had read Noah's story. "Your son's words gave me strength," she wrote. "Whenever I feel like I can't go on, I think of Noah. And I remember to look for rainbows." Emily sat there, staring at the screen, her hands trembling. Noah's light was still shining. The day everything changed. One afternoon, months after Noah had passed, Emily found herself at the park again. She sat on a bench, watching the children play, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin. And then, just like before, a little boy ran past her, laughing. But this time, something fluttered onto her lap. A butterfly. A small, delicate, golden-winged butterfly. Her breath caught. Tears welled in her eyes as she cupped her hands, watching the tiny creature rest for a moment before taking flight again. Noah had promised her signs, and he was keeping his promise, learning to live with the unseen. The weight of an empty house. Months had passed, yet Emily still felt the hollow silence of the house pressing down on her like a weight she couldn't shake. Noah's room remained untouched. His toys were still arranged in their usual places, his little shoes still lined up by the door. She couldn't bring herself to move anything. She avoided the room most days, afraid of what it would do to her. But some nights, when the loneliness felt unbearable, she would step inside and sit on his bed, letting the memories surround her. The echoes of his laughter haunted her, but so did the warmth of his love. One night, she sat in his rocking chair, cradling his favorite stuffed T-Rex, and whispered into the darkness, "Noah, I don't know how to do this without you." A soft breeze drifted through the room, even though the windows were closed. Emily closed her eyes. She didn't need to see him to know he was there. The first steps forward. It wasn't until Claire visited one afternoon that Emily truly realized how much time had passed. Claire placed a gentle hand on her sister's shoulder. "Em, you need to get out of this house for a little while." Emily sighed. "I don't know if I can." "You don't have to go far," Claire said. "Just a drive. A walk. Anything. I'll come with you." After a long pause, Emily nodded. "Okay, just for a little while." They drove to the countryside, where golden fields stretched out under an endless blue sky. Emily watched the world pass by through the car window, realizing how much she had been missing. When they reached a quiet hilltop, Claire parked and led her to a small overlook. Emily took a deep breath, letting the fresh air fill her lungs. And then, just as she was about to speak, something caught her eye. A rainbow, faint but undeniable, arched across the sky like a promise. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. Claire followed her gaze and squeezed her hand. "Noah's here, isn't he?" Emily nodded, unable to speak. Maybe this was the start of something new, an unexpected encounter. A week later, Emily went back to the park. She sat on the same bench where she had first seen the butterfly, watching the children run and play. She wasn't sure why she had come, but something inside her told her she needed to be here. And that's when she saw him. A little boy, no older than Noah had been, struggling to tie his shoelaces. He was sitting alone, frustration evident on his tiny face. Without thinking, Emily walked over and knelt down. "Need some help?" The boy looked up at her, his big brown eyes filled with frustration. "I can't get it right," he huffed. Emily smiled gently. "Want to learn a trick?" He nodded eagerly. With practiced hands, she showed him the simple loop method Noah had once struggled with. "Now you try," she encouraged. He furrowed his brows, his tongue sticking out slightly as he concentrated. And then, success. His face lit up with pride. "I did it." Emily laughed, warmth spreading through her chest. "You sure did." "Thank you, lady," he chirped before running off. She sat back on the bench, her heart pounding. For the first time in months, she felt something shift inside her. A spark. A reminder that even in grief, there was still love to give. Keeping Noah's light alive. That night, Emily made a decision. She couldn't keep Noah locked away in her grief. She needed to share his love, his kindness, his memory with the world. She grabbed her laptop and began typing. She started a project, a foundation in Noah's name, dedicated to helping families with sick children. She reached out to local hospitals, offering small care packages, handwritten letters of encouragement, anything to remind struggling parents that they weren't alone. Word spread quickly. People donated, volunteered, and shared their own stories of love and loss. And Emily? She felt Noah in every single act of kindness, the dream that changed everything. One night, after a long day of working on the foundation, Emily finally collapsed into bed. As soon as she closed her eyes, she saw him. Noah, standing in a golden field, his messy brown hair tousled by the wind. "Mommy," he called, his voice filled with joy. Tears streamed down Emily's face. "Noah, baby." She ran to him, scooping him into her arms, breathing him in. "You're doing so good, Mommy," he whispered against her shoulder. She held him tighter. "I miss you so much. I'm always with you," he said, pulling back to look at her. His blue eyes sparkled like the sky. "You don't have to be sad anymore." Emily cupped his little face. "I'll always miss you." Noah smiled. "But I'll always be in the rainbows, remember?" A soft golden light surrounded him. Emily wanted to hold on forever. But as she blinked, he slowly faded. The last thing she saw was his smile. And then she woke up. Tears stained her pillow, but for the first time in a long time, her heart wasn't heavy. She knew, deep in her soul, that Noah was at peace, and that he wanted her to be too. A new purpose in the midst of pain. The dawn of a new chapter. Emily woke up to the soft golden glow of the sunrise filtering through her window. For the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't wake up to an unbearable ache in her chest. The pain was still there. It would always be there, but it felt different now. It no longer consumed her. She sat up, brushing away the last traces of sleep, her dream of Noah still fresh in her mind. She could still hear his little voice, still feel the warmth of his hug. It wasn't just a dream. It was more than that. It was a message. Noah wanted her to live. He wanted her to be happy. And she was going to try. Finding strength in others. The foundation Emily had started in Noah's name was growing faster than she had ever imagined. What had begun as a small project to help grieving parents had now turned into a movement. Emails poured in from families who had lost children, from parents sitting in hospital rooms, from strangers who had been touched by Noah's story. They shared their pain, their fears, their moments of hope. One letter stood out to Emily. It was from a mother named Jessica, whose 3-year-old daughter, Lily, was battling leukemia. "I read about Noah, and I can't stop crying. I'm so scared of losing my little girl. How did you survive this? How do you keep going?" Emily stared at the message, her hands trembling. How had she survived? The truth was, she didn't know. She had been drowning in grief, lost in sorrow. But somehow, she had kept moving forward. Somehow, She had found a way to keep Noah's love alive. Emily took a deep breath and began to type. Jessica, I won't lie to you. Losing a child is the hardest thing in the world. There were days I didn't want to get out of bed. Days I wished I could trade places with him. But then I realized something. My son wouldn't want me to spend the rest of my life suffering. He would want me to live, to laugh, to find joy again. And I believe your little girl would want the same for you. Don't let fear steal the time you still have with her. Love her fiercely, every single moment. And if the worst happens, know that love doesn't end. It just changes. She hit send and let out a shaky breath. This was why she was still here. This was her purpose now, facing the past. There was one thing Emily had been avoiding since Noah's passing: the hospital. She hadn't been back since the night she had lost him. The very thought of those sterile hallways, the beeping monitors, the smell of antiseptic, it made her stomach churn. But she knew she had to go. One of the programs she had launched in Noah's memory was a care package initiative for terminally ill children. Parents would receive handwritten letters from other grieving parents, along with small gifts. Things Noah had loved, like stuffed dinosaurs, warm blankets, and bedtime storybooks. And today, she was delivering them herself. Claire insisted on coming with her. You don't have to do this alone, she said as they pulled into the hospital parking lot. Emily swallowed hard, gripping the steering wheel. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She could still see herself running down these halls, clutching Noah's little hand, praying for a miracle that never came. You okay? Claire asked gently. Emily forced herself to breathe. I have to do this. Hand in hand, they'd walked inside. An unforgettable encounter. As soon as Emily stepped into the pediatric ward, her chest tightened. The bright murals on the walls, the sound of cartoons playing on the TV, the small children in hospital gowns. It was all too familiar. A nurse recognized her immediately. Emily, she said softly, her eyes filled with sympathy. It's so good to see you again. Emily nodded, unable to find her voice. They were led to a small playroom where a few children sat coloring. The sight of their tiny hands clutching crayons, their innocent giggles, it nearly broke her. And then she saw Lily, the little girl from the email. Jessica sat beside her, holding her tiny hand. Her eyes were tired, her face pale. Emily took a deep breath and walked over. Jessica? The woman looked up, and the moment she realized who Emily was, she burst into tears. I got your email, she choked out. I've read it 100 times. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be strong. Emily knelt beside her, taking her hand. You don't have to be strong all the time. Some days will be impossible, but you're not alone. Lily looked up, her big brown eyes curious. Are you Noah's mommy? Emily's heart squeezed. Yes, sweet girl. I am. Lily smiled. My mommy told me he's in the rainbows. Tears blurred Emily's vision. She stroked Lily's soft curls, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, he is. And in that moment, she knew Noah had brought her here. The letter she had feared to write. That night, Emily sat by her desk, staring at a blank sheet of paper. She had written hundreds of letters to grieving parents. But there was one letter she had been avoiding. A letter to Noah. Her hand shook as she picked up her pen. My sweet Noah, it's been months since you left, and yet I feel you everywhere. In the wind, in the sun, in the rainbows. I miss you more than words can say, but I'm trying to be okay. I'm trying to live the way you would want me to. You changed my life, baby. You changed the world. And I promise I will keep your light shining. I love you, forever and always. Mommy. She folded the letter carefully and placed it inside an envelope. Then she walked outside, holding it to her chest. A soft breeze kissed her skin, and as she looked up, she saw it. A single golden butterfly fluttering by. She smiled through her tears. I love you too, baby. The legacy of love. A new beginning from an unbearable end. Emily never believed in signs. At least, not before Noah. Before losing him, life had seemed straightforward, predictable, and controllable. But grief had rewritten her reality. It had taught her that love didn't end with loss. It transformed. It whispered through the rustling leaves, danced in golden butterflies, and painted itself across the sky in soft rainbows. The letter she had written to Noah felt like the final piece of a puzzle she had been struggling to complete. It didn't mean the pain was gone. It didn't mean she had fully healed, if such a thing were even possible. But it did mean she was ready. Ready to live, not just exist. Ready to embrace joy, even with sorrow lingering in the background. And most importantly, ready to carry Noah's love into the world in a way that would never fade. An unfinished mission. The foundation Emily had started in Noah's name was growing rapidly. Donations poured in. Volunteers signed up. Hospitals reached out, asking how they could be part of it. But Emily wanted to do more. She remembered every sleepless night she had spent beside Noah in the hospital, how isolating, terrifying, and heartbreaking it had been. She had wished for someone who understood, someone who could hold her hand and say, "You're not alone." Now she had the power to be that person for someone else. So she made a decision. She wouldn't just run the foundation from behind a desk. She would go out into the world and be there, physically, for those who needed her most. And that decision led her to the hardest, yet most meaningful journey of her life, returning to the place of goodbye. There was one hospital she had been avoiding, the hospital where she had said goodbye to Noah. Everything in her screamed against going back. It felt like willingly stepping into a nightmare. But she had made a promise. To Noah, to herself, to the parents who were still living through the nightmare she had barely survived. And so, one crisp autumn morning, she walked through those doors again. The scent of antiseptic filled her nostrils. The steady beeping of monitors echoed down the hall. Nurses bustled by, their faces a mix of exhaustion and compassion. Emily's hands trembled as she stepped onto the pediatric floor. She almost turned around, almost ran. But then she saw a mother sitting in the hallway, her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Something inside Emily clicked into place. She knew that kind of grief. She knew that kind of loneliness. So instead of walking away, she sat beside her. The woman glanced up, startled. Emily didn't say anything at first. She simply reached out and took her hand. And just like that, the dam broke. The mother collapsed into Emily's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Emily held her the way she had wished someone had held her. No empty words, no false promises, just presence, just love. And in that moment, she knew this was where she was meant to be. Noah's Garden. Months later, Emily started a new project, Noah's Garden. She worked with hospitals to create small, peaceful spaces where parents and children could escape the sterile walls of the medical world, even if only for a moment. She had learned, through her own pain, that healing didn't just come from medicine. It came from a moment of peace, a breath of fresh air, the sight of a butterfly landing on a flower. The first Noah's Garden opened in the very hospital where she had said goodbye to him. It was filled with bright wildflowers, stone benches, and a small waterfall that trickled gently into a koi pond. And in the very center, a plaque read,